right, hello everybody. Welcome to the Liberty Revolt. We are here today with Sharika from Hot Mike Soonie podcast. Sharika, how are you?
Good. You could just call me Soonie though. That's Hot Mike is just Hot Mike. Soonie is
All right,
my
all right. I wasn't
name.
sure. I wasn't sure about how you wanted to go with it. So
What's up, guys?
What's up?
just hanging out.
So this is the
So you
Friday
got a story
community
tonight.
chat. On Fridays, we like to reach out to our fellow patriots and start dialogues about current events, about topics that we're interested in. Soonie, could you tell us a little bit about your podcast?
So I started the podcast because, like you, I heard the Patriots call. That's what people say. And I just got tired of the false narrative. And a lot of people don't really hear it from black conservatives. So I just put, I put even more of a target on my back, but it feels good. I started this podcast to get the truth out. Any means necessary. It doesn't matter. I don't even care who likes it at this point. Because we need the truth to get out.
How long have you been doing this podcast?
Right.
This about 3 months, honestly. We started it just hopping on live every now and then. And then I noticed people started to watch. I noticed I started to get a lot of backlash. And I was just like, all right, I'm doing something. So we turned it into a podcast. And it just took a life of its own. And here we are.
So what would you say your ratio of backlash to praise is for this podcast? Because like you said, being a black conservative is not exactly in the mainstream right now.
Yeah. I will say it's a mixture. I'm going to say it's 50-50. Most of my backlash does come from other blacks. It just is what it is. I'm starting to meet more black conservatives as we network and do more shows. But most of my audience is white.
Yeah.
So the backlash and the praise is 50-50 because I get people on there that love what I'm talking about, and then I get people on there that are just like, not trying to hear it.
Sure.
Yeah, we say it a lot on our show that the right at this point, Republicans, will take anybody that they can get, It's like,
Yeah.
Now really, back maybe in like the 80s and the 90s, they were like, oh, anti-LGBT, anti-whatever. Now we're like, we'll take the LGBTQQ, we want them all, bring them over.
Yeah, the walkaway
They are.
movement has seriously 30-year-old self-proclaimed vampire goths, and there's some drag queen conservatives and all kinds of
my
things
gosh.
going on. Because and here's one of the reasons why I'm kind of hopeful about the situation is, in a strange way, conservatives have become punk rock. We've become the counterculture. We are the edgy counterculture on college campuses now.
We are. I've heard plenty of people like, yo, you are so badass. You wore that hat out there? Yeah. What? People are shocked. Like,
Right.
wear this hat. It's okay. Wear it.
People taking pictures with you and stuff, right? Like,
Just don't wear it
They're
around
so
those
shocked.
peaceful protesters in Portland.
You know what? I'm going to be in Seattle on the 22nd. We're going to spend a couple hours there. I probably won't wear the hat because we'll have our kids with us. But I might do something. We'll see. I'll take a picture
Investigative journalism.
and just snap the hat up. What'd you say?
I said do some investigative journalism.
I want to. But it's just, my kids are going to be there. We're traveling. We're moving to another country. I want to do all
Right.
that. I want to get out there and see what's actually going on.
So you're only gonna be
But I'm not
there-
going to put them in harm's way. So,
So you're only gonna be there while you're stopping in between
a couple
flights?
hours.
Mm.
Yeah. So we'll get there. We'll have a little, a layover. And we're going to rent a car, go explore the city a bit. So I'll probably take pictures.
a little live stream out the window or something, I mean, I'm sure people
Try-
want to see
Have you
what's
been there
going on.
before?
Yeah.
Have you been there
Have I been
before?
to Seattle before? Yeah.
They have great apples.
What?
When I was
They
when
do.
I was in
And their seafood is amazing.
when I was over there was apple trees all over the place, and I was so happy about it. When I was a kid here in Fort Collins,
Yeah, I had never been there.
I could navigate the neighborhood streets on the way home depending on which fruit trees and bushes I wanted to hit.
That's crazy. I didn't get to see that. I got to see Mount St. Helen. We had a little dinner off of the. They have a harbor there, and the mountains right there in the background. So we kind of stayed. I guess that would be the city portion. My husband has family out there, so we're just gonna probably do the same thing again. Just fellowship and have dinner.
So I used to be a touring drummer, and I went out there to play a rock concert, and we stayed in what was called the Lost House, and this house was just like. I had no idea who actually lived there because it was kind of like a crash spot for like 50 young, otherwise homeless partiers, and it was bananas. I couldn't believe it.
Cool, though.
Yeah, the whole house was just graffitied top to bottom. It's probably Antifa's organization's headquarters right about now.
That sounds right.
Chop before it was chop.
Oh yeah, it was absolutely autonomous.
Yeah, so, kind of rounding into that, I think the Pacific Northwest is sort of the whole progenitor of this sort of Antifa, neo-Marxist, let's go full socialist communist movement here. And, that's one thing we want to talk about today is sort of the infiltration of this ideology into, these sort of fringe groups who are not only pushing their agenda, with the protests, but with things like Black Lives Matter, where they say they're a neo-Marxist organization.
Right. It's counterproductive, in my opinion, when you look at it. They're not, if they were actually protesting, actual protests, peaceful protests, and actually wanting change and going about it in the right way, I could understand. But you're tearing buildings down. They're now coming for the Western nuclear family, and we all know what that is. They have labeled everything white supremacist, including Antifa. So we just have two very prominent terrorist groups kind of just running that portion, and they're running a lot of democratic cities.
Right, and there's no logical end to this movement other than just the complete destruction of the West. I mean, really, there's no end point. So, do you guys remember the frontline moms in the Antifa protests?
Yes.
Those just got, I heard they got castigated by some of the black organizers of the protests out there for being too white.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
the protest moms were not woke enough. Out there getting pelted, being human shields for the rioters, being pelted with pepper bombs. We're not quite woke enough.
What, do they want you to get a tan first? It's freaking Portland. There's not even any sun. What are you supposed to do?
Right? The Klan with a tan.
That right there should clue everyone in on the type of organization Black Lives Matter is. Now, me, on my podcast, I speak out against them every chance I get. I don't think people really know what the organization is. They have just attached themselves to Black Lives Matter. But origins matter.
They're like a leech, you know what I mean? Like the protests, the people holding up signs that say Black Lives Matter, they actually think, like, hey, cops shouldn't shoot black people. I'm like, no, duh. But the organization Black Lives Matter came in on the back of this and was like, yeah, we're going to push our neo-Marxist socialist agenda and attach it to this thing. Yeah. And, it really brings down the whole movement in so many people's eyes. It's like, you guys are doing way more harm than good with this, and that sucks.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Specifically the groups that they're out saying they're out to protect.
They're essentially doing what Democrats do to a big portion of the black community, and they are just exploiting. They're exploiting it. They're making money off of it, and they're getting powerful because they have all these powerful elites funding this specific group,
and including
China.
Like foreign governments that hate us.
Right.
Yeah.
If, in my opinion, if Trump doesn't get a hold on this, he's the president at the end of the day. He's responsible for an entire country. If it's getting to the point where cities are being destroyed and leaders aren't doing anything, you have no choice but to declare martial law and send in the military. People are complaining about that, but you're setting us on that path by what you're doing.
Right. I mean, they really are the authoritarian fascist group starting this. Right? The federal agents, the presence of federal agents is a response to the fascism that's already in the streets, because what these groups have essentially done is decided, to hell with the democratic process, we're just going to set the building on fire and intimidate people into going along with us.
Right.
Sure. And I will say, at least right now, the feds have left Portland. I don't know if you guys saw that. And Portland had its first night of peaceful protests in like 50-something days. And, I'm just praying that these idiots are not going to go back on their freaking war path. It's like, okay, you guys got what you wanted. The feds are gone. You're not going to burn down the courthouse. We get it now. You want to peacefully protest. Keep that up. But, if these fringe elements come out and rekindle the fire, they are just going to dig themselves into a deeper and deeper hole. They're never going to get what they want that way.
They're not. And it's almost like, what is it going to take for people to see? Like Edmund Burke says, those who don't know history repeat it. And this is a lot of young people with nothing to do. COVID has taken away jobs, taken away school, it's taken away a lot of activities. So you have all these teenagers, young adults in the streets just looking up, just up to recklessness. I think they need to open everything back up. Let people go back to normal life, and I guarantee you would see a change in America. Now, maybe I'm just being optimistic, but I think if they went back and they opened everything back up and allowed kids to go back to school, they would be in school.
Right, and even the thing that really made me mad today is, I believe that this disease is a problem. It's a serious problem, and I was fine with the lockdowns and stuff when they happened, but Dr. Fauci, I had a certain amount of respect for him before, but today he came out and said that the protest didn't contribute to this new outbreak that we're seeing. Like, dude, that is stupidity on a level I can't even fathom. When you look at the demonstrations in places like Austin, Texas, there's literally about 100,000 people shoulder to shoulder in one place. And you're going to tell me that did not contribute?
Yeah, because they all had masks on. Okay, sir.
You see a surgical mask, how it has a little opening to the side here. Most people don't push it down. They don't push it down. And when they breathe, it goes poof, right out the side. So the person standing next to you, they're like getting it through the side of their mask.
Well, Fauci's a plant. We all know Fauci is a deep state plant. What do you expect from him? He went in there and he said what he was told to say. That's what Fauci is.
And the CDC, I was talking about this earlier with Dylan, is that, they told everyone not to wear masks in the beginning, even though they knew, and they told us that they knew that it, reduced transmission by 40% if you wear the mask right. But they told people not to wear them because they thought there was going to be a run. So the CDC is complicit in, by their very own logic, helping a ton of people get infected because they were worried that people were going to buy masks. Like, you guys are dicks, man.
I remember that. They sent out a lot of conflicting information. The CDC, the WHO, all those guys are just terrible. The UN is the worst of all.
The WHO. Don't get me started on that.
I've been diving a little bit into some of the conspiracy theory things, the Bilderberg Group, and the elite's agenda to depopulate the Earth and to use climate change as an excuse to depopulate the Earth by basically saying, well, there's this climate crisis and we're going to have to cut the human race's population down to save the planet, so everybody just get on board. And You know, if we can't get everybody to
Get on board.
self-sterilize or restrain from reproducing, then we're going to have to use coercive measures, whatever that means. And Bill Gates and Ted Turner and all of these super wealthy leaders, CEOs of big international corporations, the heads of the banks, the heads of the governments, deep state agents, billionaires around the world have all been getting together and having these conversations for a long time, and they've been looking to tear down the United States, because that is if they can tear down the United States Constitution and strip the freedoms away, and then get us involved in these multinational entities such as the EU, the UN, and all these other groups, and they can basically just implement a world government. And the UN is a big part of that. The WHO is a big part of that.
They are. I had this. It's not off topic because it kind of ties into what we talked about yesterday, which is population engineering. I was thinking about all of the crazy weather we were having for a couple years. Now, it has died down a lot. I don't know if people have noticed that. We haven't really had too many natural disasters. But the 1% has a patent on natural disasters. They make money essentially off of the panic of the country. They make money when you go buy all that toilet paper and act a fool and you go buy all the bread, etc. They patent these things and they make millions off of literal devastation and death.
Oh, the bankers have been funding both sides of every war since before World War I.
Yeah.
Ask the Swiss about that. They're the masters. Why do you think Hitler didn't invade Switzerland? Because they had all his money.
He was smart. He was smart in that aspect.
Yeah. People think it was, the mountains. Like, oh, you don't want to invade Switzerland because of the mountains. Even Hannibal invaded the Roman Empire by taking elephants over mountains. So you're going to tell me Hitler didn't invade Switzerland because of mountains? Dude, Switzerland had everybody's money, and they knew it.
Yep.
You don't touch the bankers. Why do you think Trump listens to Mnuchin? Mnuchin's like the one guy Trump is like, oh, whatever you say, bro, I'll listen to it, because he's a banker from Goldman Sachs. You want to find out and control stuff.
Oh, how much do you guys know about George Soros?
Honestly, not as much as I should.
So I don't know that much either. But I know that, so basically he was a Jew during the Nazi reign in Germany, and how he got through it was he acted as a plant on behalf of the Nazis and ratted out where other Jews were living. And then I don't know how he made his money after all these events, but he basically has been openly stating for decades that he has so much money that he can essentially decide to manipulate currencies simply by withdrawing his money from the bank. He can bankrupt countries.
That's what George Soros said.
This is I have a friend who's married to a Macedonian girl, and George Soros is actually funding a fringe group in Macedonia who are trying to slowly make an insurgency on the Macedonian government. And I don't know how much, I haven't independently verified this, but this Macedonian girl, she hates George Soros with a passion because she sees him basically trying to take down her country. Right. And this is the thing, is he has so much wealth as a billionaire philanthropist that he can decide the direction of things just by funding certain groups. And you wonder,
he has collapsed several countries, their economy. He's collapsed several economies in the past 10 years. Glenn Beck used to do specials when he was on Fox News. He used to do specials on George Soros. This was back, I was 19, 18, watching this stuff. He warned everything that we're going through now. Glenn Beck talked about it in 2008, 2009.
Right. Everybody's talking about Trump. Trump is the sun that our galaxy revolves around right now. But, let's be honest. Trump is one small piece on the chessboard, right? You have actors in this world who are influencing things in such massive ways, and the vast majority of people don't know anything about them. President Xi of China, he's going to be president of presumably the most powerful country in the world for the rest of our lives if the United States doesn't get its crap together. Shouldn't people be a little more familiar with his story and what motivates him? George Soros, Bill Gates, David Rockefeller. I mean, these are all people that we should have our thumb on. We should understand what they're up to. And the fact that we spend so much time talking about, President Trump and this, that, and the other, when there are forces at play in this world that are so much bigger.
But to people, that's conspiracy. All they see is the United States, the president, and that's it. There's nothing outside of their realm. When you go there, it's like, right, you're a conspiracy theorist, and it's like, no, like, this is really what's happening.
Yeah, well, I mean, it gets to a point when you're talking about things that far out of your control that it almost feels like, why am I talking about this? I can't do anything. At least I can vote for whether or not Donald Trump is president, right?
Right.
Well, it's like, if everybody knew about it, if everybody knew about it and thought about it and kind of thought the same way, then they would vote that way. Then we would elect representatives who were, tougher on China or who understood the history behind certain regimes and things like that. So educating people and knowing about it in a way and putting it out there is doing your part. I mean, it's hard to devalue the value of education and conversation because, everything starts in the parlor room before it gets into the policy board.
Right, and in some sense, I mean, I really do think that, Bernie Sanders has a lot of great points. I mean, with the wealth that the Rockefellers and Jeff Bezos and Zuckerberg and all of the Rothschilds, these people have, we really could implement social safety nets and help almost everyone on the planet, and they would still have more money between the 3 of them, the 4 of them, the 5 of them than the rest of the world put together. I mean, it really is true. The problem with Bernie Sanders' policies is that they're not bound by American borders. None of these people are. None of these billionaires are bound by American borders and tax laws, right? So as soon as he tries to implement these policies to confiscate their wealth and redistribute it, they leave the middle classes left to flip the bill. And it just they'll just bankrupt the country and invest in China.
Yeah, they'll leave.
Yeah, and we see that, the Panama Papers, I don't know if you guys remember that, but that was tied, to everybody from ex-presidents of the U.S. to CEOs to Vladimir Putin to everybody. It's like these tax havens that everyone has in these offshore locations. There's no way to access that. I mean, unless you're going to round up all the CEOs at the same time, and put them in some kind of torture chamber or something and be like, all right, we're going to get your money, we're going to find it, or this is going to happen. Like, I don't really see a way that we could possibly work on, the 1% redistribution efforts. Like, Elon Musk, his salary was $54,000. His salary, right, of taxable income. He had $54K of taxable income, and I think $23 billion of non-taxable income last year. No, 2018.
Right. Well, they'll either reinvest it in their business, they'll give it to a charity, and often these charities are like, George Soros opens a charity, and his buddy puts his money in that charity. They all put their money in each other's charities, and then just have access to it whenever they want. They're not.
It's a huge monopoly.
If there was some sort of world government where we actually could, take it to the UN level and say at some point this amount of wealth is unreasonable, that's a conversation. But to implement it we're going to implement it here in the United States. I mean, it almost has to be a global effort if you were going to try to do a lot of these things.
Yeah. That's true. There's not much you can do in this with our democracy that we have now.
Yeah, but you'd have to give up so much of your freedom to, like, international bureaucrats that are so detached from the lives of the people inside the countries that
Right.
you would have to give up
thanks.
so much of your nation's sovereignty and so much of your personal freedoms to give enough power to those kind of groups that they could actually. I mean, here's the problem with redistribution and really any government policy that is geared towards fixing injustices. The government can't solve any problems unless it can confiscate the wealth and the resources to do so. And if you give the government enough wealth and resources to do that, typically they don't do it. Somewhere between
Right.
point A and point B, nothing happens, and it just turns into an authoritarian tyranny.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's kind of like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Because I
Right.
think that type of, just wanting that type of redistribution of funds, that's a utopic society. No one is going to say, okay, yep, here, take my wealth, and we're going to redistribute. They're not going to do that. That's
Right,
my
and
money. I
Right,
work
no
for
one-
it.
And they try
No
to
one
act,
wants to do it.
they try to act like it's like capitalism is inherently greedy and socialism is inherently generous. That's BS.
No, it's not.
Because when you don't take somebody's money in order to redistribute it and take a slice off the top for yourself
Right.
in any
Right.
way that's ethical, right? It's immoral to steal, right?
Well, the thing is, these systems are made of individual human beings, and when it comes down to it, all these words, socialism, capitalism, whatever, they're words in our heads, and everybody's an individual,
Right.
right?
Systems
So
don't have values.
when you come down to it, humans are greedy. Humans are not compassionate. Humans are compassionate for a small group of people within their in-group. So if you try to make people compassionate all the time, everyone compassionate for everyone else in the whole world, that's socialism. I mean, how could anybody who studies anthropology, history, sociology believe in any way that that's a feasible solution to the human problem? It's just not.
So, imagine this: there's a woman on the street corner. She needs shelter. Maybe she needs some medical attention. Right? If I go up to somebody on the street and rob them so that I can then give this woman some money, is that not a crime?
Yeah.
Even if everybody agrees that this person has too much money and this woman should be taken care of, does that make it okay for
Right.
me to go by force steal somebody's money and
Somebody else's
and give
money.
it to somebody else?
And another question I have for everybody that's on board with socialism is, a lot of people work hard. Successful people, those rich people, at the end of the day, they work their ass off to get what they have. They didn't just inherit it out of nowhere. Some people did. But a lot of people work their tails off. And I'm sorry, but me and my husband work hard. I don't feel like I should have to share my funds with you. That's going to create a lazy society.
Right. It actually
Of
does
people
promote bad values, right?
Yeah.
It de-incentivizes self-reliance. It de-incentivizes charity. It de-incentivizes work ethic. And here's the thing. What's the difference between a private monopoly and a government monopoly, which is essentially what socialist programs are? They're a government monopoly, right? The only difference is a private
Yeah.
monopoly. People can vote by not spending their money on that product or by doing this, that, and the other.
Right.
A government monopoly, if it's acting in a way that's unsustainable, the answer is always the same. Well, we just need more taxpayer money and we could fix the problem.
Yeah. We would be footing the bill. That's just it.
Right. And I like what's his name? Jonah Goldberg wrote a book called Suicide of the West, and he makes a really good point in the book that says under, non-interference capitalistic governments, especially the U.S. that kind of arose in the 1800s, 1900s, government finally became something more than a glorified criminal enterprise. Because if you look at every government in the history of the world before this, all they did was enslave their people, put them on land, say, we own this land, you're going to work it, you're going to give us what you have, and you're going to give us half your money while you're at it, and we're going to take your wife if we want to. Right?
Yeah.
So this is really the non-interventionist capitalist government is the first time in history that there isn't some oligarchic cabal of people who are going to settle you in a place and come for your wealth in the form of serfdom or taxes or something of the sort. So really, we've got something precious here, and that's what people don't understand, is that it's not natural, right? Every other government trends towards authoritarianism without checks and balances.
Right, that's not... I don't think people understand what socialism is. They paint this picture of we're all this, this is a big pot. We're all going to benefit. This is what's best for the communities. We want to take care of our poor. If we really wanted to eliminate poverty, we could eliminate some of these government programs that we have and eliminate poverty.
Right.
It's that simple.
We've spent $24 trillion on the war on poverty, and poverty has essentially remained the same. Poverty has gone down, but at a slower rate than capitalism has already been naturally lifting people out of poverty, right? Capitalism, innovations, all these things have already been lifting people out of poverty at staggering rates. It's honestly these redistribution government schemes that have been just bankrupting our government. Why are we in debt? Because year after year after year, our Congress spends more money than they take in. And this isn't an issue with how much we're taxing. In fact, the last 4 times we've had presidents in the last 50 years who have reduced taxes, it has actually brought in more government revenue because the businesses have been able to accumulate more money and expand. And when they expand, they hire more people. And when they hire more people, there's a larger tax base. It's the difference between taxing one Walmart at 70% or taxing 4 Walmarts at 40%. Right? You can actually make more in some cases by taxing less. And when we look at the debt is not what's causing, when we look at our tax revenue, that's not what's causing the debt. What's causing the debt is government spending, the vast majority of which is mandatory spending, and that's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, these other programs that the Budget Committee literally doesn't even get to have a vote on. What the Budget Committee and the government votes on is only 30% of the spending, and they go overboard on that too. Because as long as the Congress has the ability to spend money in the attempts to buy votes, they do it, right?
Yeah, they do.
So, I think we really do. We have to cut Social Security and leave it to private individuals to make sure they take care of their own future. We used to have social institutions like churches and much tighter communities that used to take care of each other later in life. It used to be one of the family values is that you take care of your grandparents no matter what. You take care of your parents and your grandparents. That's still the case in most of the countries that are rising economically. That's a big part of it, is they prioritize family, not social programs, right? So,
well, do you think that's going to come back?
No.
Do you guys think that it's possible for that to come back?
For family values,
I mean, realistically.
Yeah, I do.
You see, okay.
Well, no.
I understand. I get what you're saying when you say we need to stick together. Family needs to take care of family. That, for me, that's once again, that's a utopic society, because I'm just going to be brutally honest. I'm not taking care of my mother. Will I be there to support her when she's old and she needs that type of help? Yeah, but should I fund it? I don't believe I should. My parents, when I leave this world or when I get old, I'm leaving my children. They're not going to take care of my funeral. They're not going to take care of me having to be in a nursing home, whatever happens. We're going to make sure that's taken care of and paid for, and also leave something behind for them.
Right. Well,
I don't want them to have to go.
Well,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, right. That's part of your obligation, is to work hard enough to leave something behind for your family too. I'm not saying that we should all just, blow our money in our 60s and expect in our 70s that our children are going to flip the bill, right? But with these Social Security programs, it's the same thing, except for the government's dipping out of it. right? All Social
Yeah.
Security is them taxing you your entire working life, and then,
Yeah.
supposedly giving it back to you at the end of your life, assuming that you're going out with old age, that you're not dying, in your 40s or 50s, or in some
Yeah.
banker-sponsored war, right? Except for they're dipping out of it all the time. There's not going to be Social Security left for us when we get old at this rate. If we
No,
don't,
it's not.
if we don't find a
It's not
way
really.
to cut Social Security, arithmetic will.
Yeah.
Well, it already is. Every president has been raiding Social Security since Nixon, and this is a well-known fact. And, they do this in Congress with the Federal Reserve. But, I mean, how do we get money anyway? We create money out of debt with the Federal Reserve, and it's a cycle that we keep up with a gun barrel to people's heads saying, you're going to buy oil in U.S. dollars no matter what. You hear me?
Yeah.
And if you don't, we're going to bomb your country and overthrow your government. And that's how we keep this system going like this. So, I don't know. I think people need to understand that we have things like IRAs. We have things like independent retirement accounts. Yo ass should be putting money in your IRA by the time you're 35. I mean, this is financial wisdom. Like, sorry, if you didn't save enough money and you're broke by the time you're 70, I'm going to blame you. Like, dude, you had how many productive years to make money and keep money?
Yeah.
Like, what expectation do you have for someone else to take care of you? Like, if you're 70 and you're broke, then...
That's a shame, but also, we also have to tie culture into that, because a lot of us, especially me, my mom didn't teach me a thing about saving. She didn't teach me about 401ks. I didn't know about credit. I didn't know anything about buying a home. She just kind of sent me out to the wolves, like, welcome to the world. And I figured I figured it out with my husband. We kind of grew up together.
Yep.
Straight out of high school. You're figuring out life. And that's why I think this generation, us, we're kind of picking up the slack, because we're like the middle child. We're the younger sibling, but we're also the older. So our kids are going to be much more equipped in this world than we were, in my opinion, as far as saving and making smart decisions financially.
Well, I like that, because now we're kind of all forced to make smart decisions financially. And you look at what the coronavirus opened up the savings wound in the U.S. and, really laid bare the fact that 70% of Americans don't have $1,000 in their savings account,
Right.
And it's like, you can, in some way, blame the people for that and say, Jesus, I mean, dude, save a little bit of money for an emergency. But like you said, Soonie, I think the culture is, like, what do they teach you in school? Do they tell you how to do your taxes in school? Do they tell you any pragmatic ways to financially succeed in public high school? Like, I never got any of that.
They teach us state
And
lessons.
this
is what
is
they teach us.
This is one thing that I've actually wanted to address personally, right? Part of the reason I started this media company, the goal is that someday I would like to start what I call the Young Patriots Club, and this would be a charity-based program, a summer school / daycare program for as free as possible for single mothers, and as cheap as possible for everybody else, but try to set up like a whole summer school curriculum that would focus all about those life issues that seem to be overwhelmingly neglected in a lot of people's homes, because it really is a family issue. Like, a lot of these things are really things that the family should be responsible for, not the school. It wasn't the original intention that the schools would be teaching you how to handle money and be a responsible adult. That used to be the parents' job, but we've had such a breakdown in the family. But so part of this curriculum would actually be teaching people the importance of marriage, how to talk to a woman, how to take a woman out on a date, why you should stick around and raise your kids, how to use basic hand tools, right? How to work on an engine, how to check your car's fluids, right? How to change a tire, right? How to handle money, right? And that would be like how to present yourself for a job interview, how to put together a resume, how to have good work ethic, how to move up the economic ladder, how to save money, how to file your own taxes, how to do all these things. Another one would be self-defense, the importance of being healthy and learning how to stick up for yourself physically and
Yeah.
verbally, right? Learning how to get outside and disconnect from technology, and taking kids out camping, taking them out shooting, doing all these things, and really like helping fill in the gaps to where maybe single mothers who are overwhelmed with trying to come up with enough money and take care of all the responsibilities by themselves, that they don't necessarily have time to teach their kids everything that those kids need to
Right.
learn. And that's part of the reason why
They don't.
why children of single mothers are so disadvantaged. It's not necessarily the mom's fault, and it's not necessarily that there's not a father figure, although that is super important. They've also shown that father figures in the community make a difference. But part of it is, if you have a single parent, they just physically don't have enough time to take care of all the finances, to come up with all the money and everything else that life demands in a modern world, and take time to actually teach their children life lessons. And I mean, I know full well what that's like.
Yeah, I'm the. I don't know if you guys saw my walking away story, but I fall into that statistic that Obama talked about in that famous speech he did when he said, children of single parent homes, 20 times more likely to go to jail, drop out of school, 5 times more likely to commit crimes. I fell in that category. I was once one of these angry teenagers walking around that we see now with no guidance.
Yeah, me too.
And
Absolutely.
At the end, I don't blame my mom. She did the best she could. But there are a lot of leftover wounds that we're like healing and trying to figure out as adults.
Right, and
You're
it
figuring
wasn't
all
until
this
I
stuff
got
out.
married that I figured anything out. It literally was not until I got a wife and she started knocking me on the side of the head every day, telling me
this
grow up
is
and
true.
get my
Feeling-
life together.
Dude, you stole my bike. You stole my bike after you left my house and left it on your porch and then had to steal another one. I mean, if there is a guy who didn't have his stuff together, it's, I know what you're saying. And it's like dude, I think it's interesting. Sorry to put that on the internet. I just think it's hilarious. It really is. My bike.
A long time ago. That was
Man.
a long time ago. I know.
But what's so funny is, Soonie, you as sort of a conservative, and I think a lot of conservative philosophy puts emphasis on personal responsibility and self-reliance, and the fact that you now have your stuff together, you understand your finances, you understand where you're going, you have a family, you have a tight unit, and you have something you're working towards, and you did this all by yourself. I mean, when you see that you can come from a background like that of single motherhood and sort of being disenfranchised and really pull yourself up out of it, then you understand the value of a philosophy which says that you can do that. And I think that has a lot to do with, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth here, but that seems to be a reason why conservatism would work for you.
No, it is. I came from a family full of liberals, extreme liberals. You can't say anything bad about Obama in my family. They're like, what?
Yeah.
You think Obama's at the dinner table with us? But it was hard, though. It was hard. It's not so much hard now because I think people just kind of understand this is where I am, and nobody's gonna change it. I'm responsible for me. I only believe in a good and evil, and that path that I was on, it didn't lead me anywhere positive. It just didn't. I can't blame my skin color and be like, oh, this happened to me because I'm black. No, it happened to me because I did certain things to put myself there. Now, when you wake up from that, because it is somewhat of a brainwashing tactic,
Right.
the world is just, you see the world. Like, voting for me is the most important thing you could do as an American, and I don't think you should take your personal feelings into the voting booth. You're supposed to be voting for the entire welfare of the country, not just yourself.
Right.
That's really why conservatism it's been a long time, but now more so I'm coming out. It's like, yes, I'm conservative. This is what it is.
So the forefather of conservatism is considered Edmund Burke, and basically the gist of his philosophy was that not that we shouldn't strive to make society better, but that we need to make sure that however we put, our policies and our governing philosophy together, that we're doing it in a way that's sustainable, right? And that we're taking into account human nature. And one of those things about human nature is if you give the government enough power to be corrupt, they're going to be corrupt, almost invariably, right? And if they don't start out corrupt, then the politician who comes up behind them typically is, right? So that's why we need to have that's why we need to have checks and balances. And yes, we want to address injustices in society, but we also have to have a government with enough checks and balances that's just inefficient enough that when evil people do become the in charge, that they can't just bulldoze over everyone, right? And this is what happens in almost every single socialist situation. People say, okay, well, there's these flaws with the free market system, right? It creates this wealth inequality. It creates these there's holes in it, right? It's not a perfect system. Like no system is perfect. But when you try to put the government in charge of these things, then you have to sacrifice personal responsibility. You have to sacrifice personal liberties in order for the government to accumulate the power to influence these injustices. And typically they don't work. And typically the response to that is more government and more government and more government and more government until eventually you run out of somebody else's money and the whole thing caves in on itself. It's a power vacuum and it just turns into chaos and a bloodbath, which is what most of human history is bloodbath after bloodbath after bloodbath.
It's wars.
For as long as we can look back. What's amazing
most people
is when your society is stable at all.
Yeah. Most people compare, especially just conservatives, they compare Trump, some of his characteristics to Edmund Burke because conservatives don't believe in big government. Trump has relinquished a lot of control back to the states where it belongs, but it becomes corrupt when we have local officials, state officials, governors that aren't doing their job. And people don't vote in local, they don't vote locally anymore. People are just concerned about voting for president. I can't even say that I voted locally since I've been voting. Just gonna be real.
And especially for things like the mayor of your town or something, which is literally going to affect you far more directly than voting for the president for the most part.
Right.
I mean, most people can't really see a change in their lifestyle or something from presidential administration to administration. But, I saw a change in my town from, having the wrong person on the board voting to knock everybody's houses down and build some stupid road, things like that. So it's like when you're walking down the road and you see your buddy's houses turn to rubble because some dickhead wanted to build a hoop. Like, these are the things that affect people's lives. And you need to vote locally. That's a good point.
It's important. Like one of my biggest influences is Malcolm X. He taught people, because he believed in the human race, that you needed to be politically sound. You need to have that type of intelligence to go in and vote and produce for your local city, for your state, and most of all for your family. And you should govern your own neighborhoods, which is what we talked about yesterday. Get to know your neighbor. Find out who's around you. So when shit hits the fan, everybody's not asked out, because that's what it looks like now. That's why so many people are afraid.
Right. And, just to be able to go and knock on someone's door and to have been in their house before. Like, if something's going down and you're just, knocking on someone's door and you're like, so this is happening, can I come in there? And you're like, who the hell are you? Go in, It's a very simple thing to do is try and have some level of community outreach. But I think there's a lot of antagonism in American society and, a lot of these anti-values like pretentiousness, and there are so many things that keep people from connecting with each other in the contemporary USA.
And the news cycle plays such a big role in that, and there's lots of different examples of this, right? Like, for example, since the 1960s, violent crime and specifically police shootings have gone down. They've plummeted, right? But distrust in police has actually gone up like 75%, right?
It's
and so
the media.
just the way the news portrays things to you. And Jonathan Haidt did he did a thing called The Coddling of the American Mind, a book, and basically the premise of this was that even though our society has gotten safer and safer, helicopter parenting has become more and more common just because of the way the news focuses on certain stories, focuses on certain the worst aspects of things going on around that. In the same course of time that kidnappings and violent crime is dropping, parents are getting much more controlling about letting their letting their children walk to the store by themselves or go play by themselves and develop their independence.
Ridiculous.
Right.
I think. Go ahead, Soonie.
I think with that, it would have to be location for me because, yeah, those things don't typically happen in your suburban, areas. But when you get to cities like, my city where it's really rural and small cities, really, they don't get paid attention to by, the mayors. I have never even seen the mayor of my city. I have no clue who this dude is. He doesn't get on TV. He doesn't talk about the ridiculous crime happening in our city. It's bad. Like, my kids, there's no way they're walking down the street. And this, no. Especially with the crime the way it is.
In a lot of places, it really differs from area to area, and I think crime has especially gone down in cities. But Dylan, to address one thing you said, because, I sometimes don't like the police. I'm pretty open about this. Violent crime has gone down. Distrust of the police has gone up. Okay, the police have nothing to do. Violent crime has gone down. They're bored. You ever dealt with bored small-town police? I have my whole life. I don't trust the police because they harassed me for 10 whole years. 10 years I'm walking down the street, going home, getting shaken down. You got a pipe in your pocket, boy? I'm like, dude, I'm like a 14-year-old. I'm wearing a backwards hat. Like, I got stopped and frisked.
Look,
more than once.
You defy the narrative. I'm so glad that you just said that. You defy the narrative. You are clearly white, and you got targeted by cops.
It's true. Like, there were like two black kids in my community, and the police would have nothing to do with them. They're like, oh no, we're not gonna mess with these guys. But you backwards cap wearing white boy living in the low income housing or whatever, you're going down. So.
Right. I mean, safe communities really are the predicate to everything else. I mean, safe communities, that's essentially the reason government exists at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can't have a safe community, then you don't have reliable education. You can't have a nice community. You can't develop property value.
Yeah, look at Libya, Syria.
Libya and Syria?
Yeah. Yeah, well, Libya, Syria, and Yemen especially, they're all basically failed states at this point. Syria less so, but, they had a civil war. But Yemen and Libya are failed states partly because there's so much violence going on at this point that the government, the provincial government can't do anything because they're so busy dealing with, violent insurgencies all the time. So you have everyone in the country neglected by the government because they're too busy fighting violent crime.
Wow. That's sad. That is, man. I can't imagine living that way. I can't imagine having to raise kids in that. I see why they flee their countries. I see why they want to come here. I'm like indifferent on immigration. I don't know how you guys feel. It's just a slippery slope. Like,
I mean, I basically can sum up my position on immigration in like two phrases. Number one, put your own oxygen mask on first, right?
Right.
Number two, if you don't have control of your borders, you don't have immigration policy because it doesn't matter what's written down on the paper. If you don't have the ability to operational control of your borders, you don't have a border policy at all, right? I think what we need to do, because at this point we're spending something like $18 billion a year on enforcing illegal immigration. If we had a wall and other technologies that would make it more difficult and de-incentivize people crossing illegally, we could revert billions of dollars into processing people's rightful claims to come in this country the right way. We could expedite the process if we weren't spending so much money on the border. And I mean, one of the things that people talk about is the whole children in cages, it's so immoral, this, that, and the other. Well, let's actually talk about it. What do you do when a family with a child, or potentially not a family? The drug cartels have operational control of the southern side of the border, and they are routinely recycling children or kidnapping children, or families send their children with them for money. They rent children, they buy children, all these different things, right? The children are kidnapped into sex slavery. They're used as pawns for people to smuggle drugs. What they'll do is they'll send a group with children this one area, and then while the border agents are preoccupied dealing with that, they'll slip in this other way, right? I mean, something like last year, and they imagine they only catch 1 in 4, right? There was 20,000 children who showed up at the border with people who were not their parents, with people who were not associated with these children in any way that wasn't exploitive, right? They've found stash houses where children are being kept, basically held hostage because they haven't, quote, paid their dues for being escorted by the cartels across the borders, and so the cartel is just recycling those children over and over. So when you have people show up at the border illegally with a child, you really have 4, kind of 5 options. You either put them both in jail until their court date, you let them go freely into the interior of the United States, which typically only like 70% show up to court and actually try to go through the legal process after getting here. The vast majority just disappear into the interior of the country. You take the parent or the adult to processing, and then you take the child to daycare until you can process it, which is what we've trying to been doing. But Democrats have defunded these daycare facilities. Essentially, that's why they're so overcrowded and run down, is because Democrats refuse to pay for the daycare facilities so that the children actually have a decent place to go while we process the claims of the adult and figure out, is this adult even related to this child, right? Or we have to spend a tremendous amount of money either flying them back to their country, or we just sent them back into the desert and hope they make it back to where they came from. There really is no humane way that is not immoral in some sense, a way to deal with it. And the most moral thing we could do is de-incentivize people to exploit children as a free ticket to get into the country, and have operational control of our borders so that we can make it easier for people to come in here legally. Because bringing in immigrants can be a very beneficial thing to our country. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're not letting children be exploited by laws that incentivize child trafficking and make it easier for people to exploit children. And we need to give the American people, they deserve to have a say on how many people we bring into the country, from where, of what cultural values, and of what merit. Right? That's all border security is giving the American people a say in who we let in, how many, and of what merit. And yeah, it's got issues, and we would love to help out everyone in the world, but you have to put on your own oxygen mask first. We can't economically destroy our own country and then render ourselves useless to address any of the root causes of the poverty around the world.
Right.
Well, Soonie, I like that you said you're kind of ambivalent on immigration, and in a way I am too, Dylan. To address what you said, I don't think there is a good solution unless you're going to give the parent and the child a genetic test to make sure they're related, right? And spend a bunch of money to hold them in a humane facility at the same time while you wait for the results of the genetic testing. Like, that's a little bit crazy. But as far as first-generation immigrants, first generation immigrants, I don't know if you guys have ever worked with like Mexicans who have just came over the border, but I mean, dude, they kick ass. These guys work harder than literally everybody else.
Here's what I would propose.
No. Let me finish. Like these first generation Mexicans really, they kick ass. And same thing with Somalis and Syrians and all these guys. They always come in and they work their asses off because they got the opportunity and they build a business and they help the country. But it's the second generation kids in Europe, in the U.S., who have been responsible for terrorist attacks. Basically, every terrorist attack that was homegrown terrorism in Europe started with the second generation kids, the children of immigrants. It wasn't the mom and the dad who did it. And even like Cholo culture in the U.S., you know, those aren't the dudes coming straight over the border from Mexico who barely speak English. Those are their children living in these nations who are like, oh, the U.S. doesn't like us, but like we're not Mexican or something. Well, they're usually the ones who are causing problems, second generation.
I think a
so
lot of the cultural
I don't know how to deal with that.
Could be dealt with by bringing them into the broader American society. My proposal is that we secure the border so at least we have operational control, and then we give everyone who's already here amnesty, essentially. I think we should, anyone who's currently living in the United States illegally, who is not a criminal other than the criminal act of crossing illegally, but who isn't over here actively engaged in criminal activities, we should give them a pathway to citizenship. But we can't do that without securing the border first, because what would happen if you announced that you were going to give amnesty to people who are here, but you don't have control of the border? I mean, in 2015-16, we were getting something like, there were months where we had 120,000 people a month, and our border agents believe they're only catching 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 possibly. There might be 4 times that. You're talking about 600,000 in a month. You're talking about like 4 million in a year, right? So what we have to do is we have to have border security first, because if we just declare we're going to give a pathway to citizenship to people here, then people rush the border in hopes of getting here in time and then saying there's no way of proving they weren't already here. And we just can't absorb that. No country in the history of the world has had to deal with the levels of immigration that our country has. And it is outrageous to say that the United States is racist. I'm sorry, it's absolutely outrageous. We have 51 million foreign-born immigrants living in the country today. And they come here, they risk their lives to come here. Many of them give up everything so that they can make it into this country.
Soonie. So can you give us? Thank you for coming back. Can you give us your perspective of why you're unsure on immigration? We were just trying to figure it out.
So I do believe that people that are coming here to seek asylum and they're looking for refuge, I do believe we should help some, but it becomes extremely difficult when we have massive waves of things. We really don't know who they are. Like you just said, there's a lot of second generation people coming in. That's bringing the crime. It's a good element and a bad element. If we're gonna do this, I think they need to bolster the heck out of border control. You need to do something about border control. Yep. You need if it gets to that point, I wouldn't mind putting the National Guard there. Why not? That could be
a human wall, right? It's not a bad idea, and I think we do. You know, in a lot of parts of the border, we do that with drones, and we do that with federal security, and it does become the issue of, do you shoot them, right? Do you if you can't apprehend them, are you gonna pop someone like it? But it is a good short-term solution.
They need to have more people out there while this wall is being built. And I'm sorry, but they need to reform immigration. They need to do something else, because allowing all these people into our country and then expecting us to offer them the same benefits we get as citizens, it's not fair, because all of us have children. What's going to be left for them? We're thinking about everybody else. Like he just said, we're putting on everybody else's oxygen mask, and we're just leaving ourselves depleted. So I think it can work, but they need to really go in and tweak it. And I really feel like they need to build border control up.
Sure, and I think that's one of the platforms that Trump really ran very successfully on was, the idea of building a wall and putting up something where you don't have a situation where people are coming over and making up Social Security numbers for children who don't exist and claiming the tax benefits of people who have been paying into the system their whole life. And I mean, compassion only extends to a certain point, because it's like I would rather send money to a family in Yemen than I would financially support with taxes a family from Mexico, because for all intents and purposes, Yemenis are a lot worse off. So, I think if we're going to kind of make our charity equitable, then we can do so in a way with people who are suffering more than, say, people who want to leave the Contras or who want to leave Nicaragua or something like that.
I agree with that, but people think that I think people need to remove emotions when it comes time to make decisions for the country. It comes off as callous, but feelings are not rational. I tell people that all the time when they talk about immigration. Well, what about those? Like, well, you know what? There's a certain way you come into the U.S., and there's nothing wrong with saying that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to preserve your country, because at the end of the day, I was born here. My mother was born here. My children were born here, and we need something they need something in the future. And it's not sustainable the way that we're going. The U.S. spends they spend ridiculous amounts of money on unnecessary things.
Right. And, bringing immigrants into the country is only one small way that we help the world's poor. Yes, it is one thing that we can do, but there is no way that we could bring in all the world's poor and help them. We just can't afford it. And here's the truth.
We can't. Yeah.
The United States has produced 68% of the world's wealth, and we give more in foreign aid than any other country, and it's not even close. The United States, for decades, has been number one on the world's charity index, right? The World Generosity Index, I think it's actually called. But that's beside the point. If we have to put on our own oxygen mask first. If we are not economically stable, we cannot keep producing wealth for the rest of the world, right? We do great things for the world. We've brought democracy to places. We're one of the only countries in the history of the world that sends its own soldiers to fight for the freedoms of other countries over and over.
Right.
And yes, we need to bring in as many immigrants as we possibly can and integrate them into our society, because yes, it does make us a stronger society to have more manpower, to have more human capital. But we have to do it in a way that's economically sustainable, because if we bankrupt ourselves, we're useless to the rest of the world. And if we can't maintain our position as the economic and militarily dominant presence on the world stage, then we're handing the torch of global dominance over to China and Russia. And if you think that's what's going to usher in this utopia, you're out of your mind.
It is not. There's so many things that we need to change about our government and the way it works, especially the Senate and the House. You shouldn't have that position for a lifetime. You should not, because
why don't we have term limits for the Senate and the House? That's crazy. I mean, we put him in for the presidency after FDR because he was in for 16, but for the Senate and the House, it's insane. You have congressmen who have been in there 80 years who know how to run a filibuster like their life depends on it, and they're literally wearing diapers in their filibuster in Congress for 35 hours because they've had 30 years of practice doing it. It's crazy.
That actually presents an interesting dichotomy, because I mean, in a sense they do have term limits in the sense that people do have to vote them in. They're not elected once and then there permanently. So I mean, these people who have been there a long time are being reelected. Yes, once they're elected,
but no one runs against the incumbent, though.
Put their thumb on the scale.
No one's going to run against Pelosi in San Francisco as a Democrat. Like, it's just going to be Pelosi and Pelosi and Pelosi and Pelosi again and again and again and again.
Stop it!
There's a few people, and they're conservatives. I'm so proud. But they're coming up and they're running against these career politicians. Like Maxine Waters is going to be unseated. You can just see it. People are starting to wake up. They're so sick of the same bullshit. Like,
Elon
People
Musk
are
said
tired.
it. Elon Musk said it. The left is losing the middle. It's true. He's got a point. Half this country doesn't vote, and if you think they're looking around at what's going on and saying and trying to determine for themselves who the extremists are, I mean, I'm pretty sure they're going to look at the mobs of people tearing down their own societies and setting the American flag on fire and going to say, yeah, I don't think these people have my best interest at heart.
Right. I don't know. I wish more people. There's a lot of smart people in the world. I feel like we are rare. People like us that can actually sit down and think of actual solutions for the entire United States. That's rare. Who sits around and thinks about that? Because they really want to fix their country. Those people, I feel like we need to be running for those positions. It takes a lot of money, yeah. But if you got your city behind you and they really see that, like, I want to change something, I want to do something. Like Trump said, what the hell do you have to lose? What does any American have to lose at this point?
By going for it. I'm saying, Soonie, you should run for office. Let's go.
I don't know.
I've heard you talk about it.
I don't think they want me in there. There's parts of me that want to. It seems like it would be really interesting. It'd be fun. But that
it's
that arena is just nasty.
Sure. Yeah,
it's huge.
It's a family decision. You'd have to have your husband totally on board, just as enthusiastic as you for the long term. Because you know, once you're in it, once you're elected, that's your life.
Right.
You are working hard.
I wouldn't mind doing it, man. I really wouldn't. I feel like they need regular citizens that actually put into the economy. Like, I'm not just sitting here collecting benefits.
Sure.
You know? People that put into like, I had this idea. Every election, whoever's running, they need to have a town hall meeting with certain Americans in the country that are actually putting in and doing stuff that produce for the economy. And we need to be able to ask them questions face to face. There is no, I'm going to present you with these are the questions we're going to ask. Absolutely not. I'm going to ask you something that I know you're not prepared for, because that's how you get the truth. We need to
John McCain.
Put them in.
John McCain used to do that. I remember in his campaign, when he was first trying to unseat George Bush as the Republican candidate, he would take questions from everybody, unscripted, not televised, crazy people. It didn't matter. Guys who were up there like, oh, I wear my tinfoil hat every day, and what are you going to do to stop the government from beaming alien waves into me? And he would answer them. Yeah. Like, if we could bring this back, and that would get people involved in the process. Say, hey, you can come you can sit down with your local senators, and you can have sort of a.
They need to make themselves accessible. They're like gods. The mayor shouldn't have that much notoriety. Like, dude, you're a mayor of a town. Come on.
You don't even. Yeah, right. Like, you should know who the mayor is. He should make himself out there, right?
Go talk to your citizens.
Well, that's one thing. I actually have to give it to Jared Polis. I know people on the right are supposed to just trash Polis all the time.
No, I like Polis. I don't give a shit, dude. I like Polis a lot.
I've had some issues with him. He's also done things that I've been like, okay, well, you're not that radical, right? Yeah, it goes back and forth. But I also understand that my state doesn't necessarily share my political values. And that's okay.
Right.
Everybody's looking at the world through a keyhole. And honestly, we need everybody's little keyhole to make the big picture. Everybody has a good point. And the truth is, and this is one of my core political beliefs, I may be right today, but my left-wing friend might be right tomorrow. So we better be friends and be willing to extend some grace to each other, because as we move forward in time, we're going to need progressives pointing out disparities and discriminations, and we're going to need conservatives digging their heels in and saying, well, hold on a second, let's not carelessly tinker around with government, because things can go really wrong, and we should have some gratitude for our traditions and the stability that we do have. And we really do need everybody's voice. Cole and I actively seek out progressives that we can go have conversations with and become friends with.
I do too.
Because the people that we really do share a lot of the same problems, and we have a ton of common ground. And it's an interesting situation. It really is an interesting situation. But I don't necessarily think that I'm so smart that I have all the answers and that I should be given the ultimate authority so that I could remake the world in my image and expect that nothing would go wrong, right? We need everybody. It takes a collective. And what the true 1% running the show, these real corrupt actors, what they don't want is people who can disagree being civil with each other and getting along and forming bonds with each other.
Well, guys, I don't know about you all, but I think that's probably a good place to leave it, is telling people that, hey, we should extend grace to each other and have conversations, and I think that's what we're all here to do. I don't care if we're all conservatives. It's not like we all toe the party line either. So
we don't.
And
America's a melting pot. That's what everybody says. It's a melting pot. Okay. Well, then we should all. When I talk to a lot of liberals and progressives, I ask questions. That I notice that draws them in. When they feel like they can tell me something and they feel like they're directing a conversation, it opens the door for other things. So when people say, I don't like Trump, okay, well, why? I don't like the way he speaks. What does that have to do with the country? Well, yeah, he has done some good. And then we get on somewhat of a parallel. We're not on the same street, but we're parallel, but we have the same common goal. In my experience, when you open that door and you have conversation and you ask questions, they're more open to listen. Because a lot of people are just turned off when they don't like what you're saying. And then they're just like, I don't want to hear nothing you got to say.
So you're like Socrates, basically, walking around Athens, asking people questions.
I absolutely think that right now at this time in our country, the left has gotten out of control. They need to be mitigated because they are an unmitigated disaster right now. They're a much bigger threat to the country, in my opinion, and that's why I'm speaking out as a conservative and actually doing this, trying to capture an audience, trying to spread the word, and conservatism is not what they're making it out to be. It really just means we want to live in a society that's stable and sustainable and economically efficient and that has operational control of the borders and a strong enough military to keep ourselves safe. Right? It sounds really nice. Oh, we shouldn't be spending billions of dollars on weapons designed to kill one another. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, you say that until you realize that, Hitler is just right around the corner building a military and is going to come kick your doors down.
Or China.
No.
China's the threat.
China. And on our radio show, we're going to talk a lot about China.
They're building up their military. They want to tear us apart. They love
the
division and the disaster and everything that's going on. They absolutely love it. Right? My message to everybody listening, thank you for tuning into the Liberty Revolt. We've had a wonderful time talking with you. Soonie, thank you for coming on. We hope we can do this again. Guys, be nice to each other. We love all Americans. We care about you. We want what's best for this country. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks
and visit Soonie's page. Absolutely, Soonie Hotline. Check her out. The podcast is wonderful. Please follow her on Instagram. She's got great memes. Almost. All right. Thank you, Soonie.
Thanks, guys. I'll be in touch.